Welcome back to another UCL Fantasy video and podcast. This will be my update draft for Matchday 1, and be sure to tune in to the deadline stream next week. That'll take place around 2 hours before the actual deadline, which is the first kickoffs of Matchday 1. Also join the UCL Fantasy League. You can see the code on screen, cCaFxb. There is a link in the description below. You click it and you automatically join, and you will see it throughout most of my videos and podcasts for UCL Fantasy. Smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. If you enjoy my content, our aim is to get this to 300 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers, which is our goal by the end of the year. Also check out all the other links like my Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, for the latest FPL and UCL Fantasy updates, the Discord server, UCL Fantasy League Draft Hound, and also Spotify. All your support is greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Just like in FPL, Euro and World Cup Fantasy, essentially every fantasy format I cover on this channel, you start off with 100 million in budget and you have to pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders and 3 forwards. I did cover all the rule changes and also the format, the new one we have in the Champions League this season, in my first draft video and podcast, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. If you still want to see a dedicated how to play guide or a chip strategy, then be sure to let me know down the comment section below. I believe the chip strategy will happen either before the Matchday 1 deadline or before the Matchday 2 one. That is going to be the plan. But in terms of the chips, we have the same ones as usual, the wildcard and the limitless. You can't play either in Matchday 1 because we all have unlimited transfers. I'm going to start off with the 2 goalkeepers. One of them has changed, but there is a 4-point family and goalkeeper who looks like one of the best options in the game. I am referring to Di Gregorio from Juventus. He's a 4-point family and option with low ownership, and he has kept clean sheets in all Serie A games so far this season. Juventus are second, only behind Inter Milan, and whilst Di Gregorio hasn't made many saves, only 2 in 3 matches, I think he can keep several clean sheets with Juventus's group phase opponents, and I think they could finish quite high up in the league table. So he is a great shout from me. His ownership will probably increase exponentially over the next couple of weeks. At 4-point family or below, I don't see any other goalkeeper coming close to Di Gregorio. If you believe differently, let me know down in the comment section below. But next up will be the high scoring goalkeeper from last season's UCL Fantasy, and that's Kobel. But if you are also looking for a Borussia Dortmund defender, a double or triple up might not be the ideal scenario, but I still like Kobel in isolation due to the saves potential. He can save penalties, and even in the group of death, Borussia Dortmund did very well, and they went all the way to the Champions League final, and Kobel was the best goalkeeper in UCL Fantasy. Can he replicate it this season? Perhaps not, but at 5 million, you can't go wrong with the Swiss. Another player who remains from my first draft is Captaincy, and it's a similar story to my 4-point family and goalkeeper. At that price and below, I don't see anybody matching Captaincy. I think he can get several ball recovery points this season, perhaps one of the most of any player, and if that's the case, he will be an absolute steal at 4.5 million. He has got 2 yellow cards in 4 La Liga starts, but the fact he's starting every single game for Barcelona is a very encouraging sign, despite the fact that he's only 17 years old. He even got an assist in Barcelona's last game, a 7-0 win. So Captaincy is a top recommendation from me, yet another differential. But next up will be a centre-back who will form part of the first defensive double-up so far this season, and that's Schlotterbeck. But I'm not fully convinced about doubling up on Borussia Dortmund defensively, to be quite honest with you. I think their group opponents are quite decent overall, and Schlotterbeck got 60 UCL Fantasy points last season. He got a few goal contributions, but mainly ball recoveries. That was his forte. Now, Mats Hummels is no longer in Europe. He was the best defender in last season's Champions League, but Schlotterbeck was second. He was right up there, and he was better than all Real Madrid assets, despite the fact that Los Merengues won the Champions League title, so I'd highly recommend him. But my third option will be another budget defender, and I'm not fully sure about him because I would expect rotation at right back, and this is Rico Lewis, who has started every single game for Manchester City so far this season, and I actually had him in the last campaign in UCL Fantasy, and he did very well for me because he started every single game in the group stages. Will that happen right now? I'm not entirely sure. If he continues to start in the Premier League, I think Kyle Walker will be the designated right back in the Champions League. So watch out for that one. I'm not fully convinced about Rico Lewis, but his ownership is currently 4%, another differential, and he can get the odd ball recovery point, but his main asset is the attacking potential, and he did very well last season. He was one of my favourite defenders in the game. But next up, I'm going for a more underrated option. Once again, very low ownership at 5%, and that is Lenormand, who did very well in the Euros for Spain, helping them lift the title, and he's now at Atletico Madrid. Last season he did fairly well in the Champions League with Real Sociedad, and they had an incredible group stage. They couldn't replicate that in the round of 16 against Paris Saint-Germain, but it's all about Atletico Madrid now, and their opening 3 fixtures are decent. And you've also got Molina at 5 million. He was a very good asset towards the beginning of the last campaign, but he's not starting games for Atletico Madrid at the moment. So if you had to go for one of their defenders, my recommendation would be Lenormand. But the 5th and final defender is someone you don't really own for the clean sheets. He might be the Pedro Porro of UCL Fantasy. You really own him for the attacking potential. And I'm going for Grimaldo. This is not a locked-in pick for my team because I don't believe that Grimaldo or Frimpong are essential like some of you claim. I don't really share that sentiment, but they are very exciting assets to own, particularly in the defensive line. They'll get several goal contributions. But if I had to pick one between Grimaldo or Frimpong, I think the Spaniard is in better form this season and he's got more goal contributions, so I'd highly recommend him at left wing back for Bayer Leverkusen, who have lost in the Bundesliga already to Leipzig, and just after they went unbeaten in the Bundesliga last year and won the German Cup, I thought they weren't going to match these numbers in the next campaign, and they look very shaky in pre-season, and going into the first few games of the new campaign, they've also looked quite vulnerable. So with Bayer Leverkusen, they can still have a great campaign, win a trophy, compete for the Bundesliga title, and go far in the Champions League, but it's a different beast to navigate this competition compared to the Europa League. Lamine Yamal is currently the highest owned UCL Fantasy asset, even over Mbappe, Bellingham, Haaland, and all these great assets in the midfield and forward line. But he is underpriced at 7.5 million. He got 2 assists in last season's Champions League, and he had an incredible Euro tournament, helping Spain lift the trophy. He was absolutely sensational in those matches, providing so many assists. In fact, he got 4 in that competition, so I'd highly recommend him as well. But I'd also urge you to consider someone like Rafinha at the same price, who will likely score more goals, and he's been in great form since March for Barcelona. So if you want to go for a differential, Rafinha is definitely one to consider. You might even want to go for both if you're back in Barcelona to have a great Champions League campaign for the first time in many years. But the second midfielder is Joshua Kimmich. I had him in my first draft. He's more of a budget option who can get ball recoveries and the odd goal contribution. He's a jack of all trades, and he actually got so many UCL Fantasy points last season with 57. That's 1 less than the likes of Bukayo Saka, who had a great campaign, but there's a 3 million difference in price, and I think Kimmich offers tremendous value for Bayern Munich. You also have Elise at 6.5, who will be far more offensive, but I think Kimmich could outscore the Frenchman this season. Now, my third midfielder is going to be quite an interesting one because he's been on fire in the Premier League. He's matching the likes of Erling Haaland in terms of FPL points. He's only 10 million in UCL Fantasy, and that's Mohamed Salah. He is well worth the price, and if I had to pick between him and Saka or even Bellingham, I'd probably give the edge to Salah at this moment in time, and it's worth remembering that Bellingham is a major doubt for Matchday 1. He might be available for that game, but they might not rush him back in. Instead, he might make the bench, but there's no guarantee he starts that match. So Salah will be primed and ready to go from Matchday 1, and he's a fantastic option. Liverpool have good fixtures in their group stage, and I know they face Real Madrid later on. Even Bayer Leverkusen could be tough, but apart from that, I think Salah can wreak havoc on everybody, and to be honest, with the form he's in, he could score a few goals against Real Madrid and Leverkusen, even if Liverpool don't win those particular matches. Let's complete the midfield with another mid-priced option in Valverde. He's had a decent start in terms of goals or assists, but if you've got 0.5 million in the bank, I'd also recommend the likes of Barcola, who is scoring or assisting in every single game so far for club and country. In the Nations League, he scored in the first minute against Italy, despite the fact that France ended up losing that game 3-1. I think Barcola is in sensational form. The only downside is that PSG's fixtures are terrible. They probably have the worst set of opponents in the group phase, but definitely I'd urge you to consider him in my latest draft or the team selection. Don't be surprised if I end up trying to shoehorn Barcola in. And Valverde is still decent. He can get ball recoveries, the odd player of the match award, and a few goals or assists. But Barcola and a few other options like Rafinha will offer far more attacking potential than the Uruguayan. But the 5th and final midfielder was highly talked about in the comment section of my recent video and podcast, and that is Florian Wirtz. He offers tremendous value at 7.5 million as well. Is he better than Yamal or Rafinha? Perhaps not, but I still think he'll get plenty of goals and assists in this season's Champions League, and he's done fairly well in the Bundesliga in this new campaign. So I'd still back him to do well. He is the golden boy for Bayer Leverkusen, and even if they struggle in the new campaign, I think Florian Wirtz will get the job done. I've done a lot of research already, and I'll continue to do so to try to find the best budget options, but at 6.5 million or below, I think Jimenez is the best forward in the game, and I'd highly recommend him if you need that enabler to facilitate some premiums in your forward line or perhaps in the midfield as well. So I'd also go for him. He's in great goal-scoring form for Feyenoord, and the fixtures are pretty decent overall, so I don't have too many complaints on that front. I think he'll do a relatively decent job. For $1 million more, you can go for Gyökeres, and for 1.5 million more, you've got Julian Alvarez, who is yet to score for Atletico Madrid, but I think the goals will come very soon for the Argentine. But the second forward is someone I had in the first draft. He is in incredible goal-scoring form with back-to-back hat-tricks, and that's Erling Haaland. Despite the fact that he's played quite poorly for Norway, and that's kind of a trend from the last couple of years, he does the business for Man City time after time again, and his goal-scoring record for club and country is simply sensational. He's pretty much scoring a goal every single game, sometimes even surpassing that. He's got more goals in the Premier League than games played, 17 compared to 69. In the Champions League, it's a similar story, so I don't think you really have too many complaints about Erling Haaland. He is the second highest owned asset for a reason. He'll probably become the top option in that regard, and I honestly don't really blame anyone going for the Norwegian. But the third and final forward and the 15th overall of this squad is Kylian Mbappe, who scored a brace in Real Madrid's last game. He has struggled a bit in La Liga, but he did score in his debut in the UEFA Super Cup against Atalanta, and he will face them again in the UEFA Champions League group phase, so that could also be very enticing. Now, Mbappe has also done fairly poorly for France in the international break so far, but France is a different kettle of fish, and you can't compare club football to the international stage. I try to provide context on all the players' form, so when Erling Haaland blanks against Gibraltar, that doesn't mean he's a terrible UCL Fantasy asset, because we know what he's doing for Man City on a consistent basis, and the same goes for Mbappe, who has an incredible record for both club and country, and the goals will soon flourish and flow for Real Madrid. And that's a team that has a lot of superstars. They're trying to find a balance for all these top quality talent, and I think eventually they will find that balance. Carlo Ancelotti is one of the best managers in the business, and Mbappe will score so many goals in this season's Champions League. Who will win the Golden Boot between him or Haaland? That's going to be a great question. Even Salah could be another contender, and a lot depends on how far these clubs go in the competition. But I'm very happy with this 15-man squad. Is it better than my first draft? I'd be very interested to see your thoughts. I think there are certain areas that are even better, like my forward line, and I'd also say the midfield is arguably even stronger, but maybe the defense has taken a slight hit, and the goalkeepers is slightly worse. David Raya to Kobel is a possible downgrade, but I don't really see too much difference in terms of quality, and either of these drafts could end up being my final squad in my team selection video and podcast, and of course the deadline stream, which will happen in over a week's time. So be sure to tune into that by hitting the notification bell of my channel and smashing the like button, subscribing as well. All your support is massively appreciated. But let me talk about the starting 11, ordering the bench, and some other key factors in UCL Fantasy. I would go for Di Gregorio in goal once again, with a back three of Kubarsi, Schlotterbeck, and Rico Lewis, Yamal, Kimmich, Salah, and Valverde as the midfield four, with Jimenez, Haaland, and Mbappe up front. My bench comprises of Kobel, Wirtz, Grimaldo, and Lenormand. And just for those of you that are confused, why are certain players on my bench? Toggle it by day and make sure that those playing on the 19th of September, and in this case with Kobel on the 18th, are on your bench. You don't want to have a case where those playing on Tuesday, the 17th of September, are on your bench, because you want the ability to make manual substitutions and take out your low-scoring players from the first day for those that are yet to play on the Wednesday or Thursday. And yes, that is true. The Champions League will now have games played on the Thursday, which will maybe take a bit of getting used to, but I think over a matter of time, we will become acclimatized to that new kind of schedule of this competition. Now, in terms of the captaincy, I'd go for Salah on the 17th of September. On the 18th, I'd still go for Erling Haaland, but I have to say, Mbappe would be another shout instead of Mohamed Salah, so that isn't fully locked in. And the fact that Liverpool are away to Milan, that could possibly shift the captaincy towards Mbappe. I'm sure a lot of you would go for the Frenchman instead, but I think it's a very close call. Salah has the better form, but the fixture is slightly tougher on paper. But AC Milan haven't won a single game so far this season, so I don't think it's going to be that tough of a game for Liverpool. I know AC Milan have pedigree in this competition. They've in fact got more Champions League titles than anybody bar Real Madrid. So maybe Kylian Mbappe is the more sensible captaincy pick. But without a doubt, Erling Haaland will be my captain on the 18th if needed. And on the 19th, I'd probably go for Lamine Yamal or any Barcelona midfielder I end up going for, because Rafinha is a great alternative to the Spaniard. So if you are new to UCL Fantasy, I'd highly recommend you check out my How to Play guide, as it will show you everything you need to for the new campaign, and not much has changed despite the difference in the league format. And now we have 8 games in the group stage compared to the usual 6, and we've also got the playoff knockouts for those teams that finish between 9th and 24th in the league table. But if you have any questions or comments, let me know down in the comment section below. I'm happy to make even more UCL Fantasy content. There will be a latest draft, a team selection, and a deadline stream, but I'm happy to do a how to play guide if the demand is there, and the chip strategy will certainly come. It's just a matter of timing. If it doesn't happen before the Matchday 1 deadline, it almost certainly will before Matchday 2. But thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. I promise to get this to 300 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, and is patreon.com/DylanRCM. Also check the Discord server, FPL League, UCL Fantasy League, Draft Town, and also Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It goes a long way to support my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Matchday 1 and the rest of the tournament, and I'll see you next time.